Have you ever sat in a quiet moment and thought to yourself, when did things change between me and my children? You spent decades raising them, changing diapers, staying up through countless sleepless nights, guiding them through heartbreaks and triumphs. You gave up weekends, vacations, and sometimes even your own dreams so theirs could come true. And now, when you speak, they interrupt. When you offer advice, it's brushed aside. When you need help, they're suddenly too busy. And perhaps the hardest part of all, you feel invisible. If this resonates with you, please know this: you are not alone. Many parents reach a point where the roles begin to reverse. You were once the protector, the teacher, the one they ran to for everything. But now, it feels like they've stopped seeing you in that light. At times, it may seem like they treat you as an inconvenience, or worse, a burden. And that kind of hurt, it cuts deeper than almost anything else. It's natural to want to push back, to remind them of everything you've done, to get angry, to shut down, or to demand respect. But here's a quiet truth, and it may surprise you. You can't demand respect and expect it to last, because true respect, lasting respect, doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from something far more powerful: your quiet strength, your clear boundaries, and your deep self-respect. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Because there are a few simple but powerful shifts you can make, starting right now, that can transform how your children see and treat you. Not by guilt or confrontation, but by showing up in your full dignity. Let's begin with something many parents struggle with: trying too hard to please them. Have you ever said yes when your whole heart wanted to say no? Maybe just to avoid conflict, or gone out of your way to help, even when you felt exhausted, unwell, or uncomfortable, just to keep the peace. It's more common than you think. Maybe you rearranged your entire day to babysit the grandkids, even though you weren't feeling your best. Maybe you let your child speak to you in a way that made your stomach twist, just to avoid seeming difficult. But here's something essential to understand. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. Not because they're bad or ungrateful, but because human nature respects what stands firm, not what always yields. Let me tell you about Margaret. She was a mother of 3, a woman who had given everything to her children. As she got older, she began stepping back more and more. She let them make decisions about her home, her health, even her finances. "I just want to keep the family together," she said. But the more she gave in, the less they listened. She thought she was being kind, but they stopped seeing her as someone they needed to take seriously. You see, respect doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from self-respect. When you constantly put yourself second, when your time, your needs, and your voice are always pushed to the side, you're sending a message. Whether you mean to or not, I don't matter as much, and others respond accordingly. So if this sounds familiar, let me say this clearly. It's okay to stop bending over backward. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set limits. You are allowed to speak up when something doesn't feel right. You're allowed to take up space, and you don't need permission to do so. Respect starts with you. The more you honor your own boundaries, the more others will too. This doesn't mean being harsh or cold. It means showing your children that your presence, your energy, and your time are valuable. That you are still a person with dignity, wisdom, and worth. Someone who stands tall in their truth. Now let's talk about another instinctive response: arguing. When someone talks down to us, the natural reaction is to fight back. You want to say, "How dare you speak to me that way?" Or, "After everything I've done for you." And while your feelings may be entirely justified, This kind of reaction rarely changes anything. In fact, it often makes things worse. So here's a shift that can change everything. Stop arguing and start leading. When you respond to disrespect with anger or emotional outbursts, it shows the other person that they still control your inner peace. But when you respond with calm, measured confidence, the message you send is different. It says, "I don't need to raise my voice. I know who I am." Let me share Frank's story. Frank was a retired teacher. In the classroom, he was deeply respected. But at home, his adult children barely listened to him. They talked over him, dismissed his concerns, even mocked some of his ideas. At first, Frank pushed back. Every conversation turned into a debate. Every disagreement ended in shouting. But nothing changed. Until one day, Frank made a quiet decision. He stopped fighting. He still shared his thoughts, but calmly. He stopped chasing their respect and started living it. He carried himself with dignity, like someone who had nothing to prove. And something amazing happened. His children started noticing. They began listening more, not because he raised his voice, but because he stopped playing the same old game. You don't have to fight for respect. You simply have to embody it. Let your calm become your power. Let your tone carry your strength. You don't need to convince your children of your worth. They'll begin to feel it, simply by being in your presence. And here's one last truth, one that may feel heavy, but it can also be incredibly freeing. You don't need your children to fulfill you emotionally. This doesn't mean you don't love them deeply. Of course you do. But the more you depend on them to make you feel appreciated or complete, the more the relationship shifts in an unhealthy direction. People, even our own children, tend to respect those who are emotionally independent. When your happiness and peace come from within, not from how often they call, how thoughtful they are, or how much they do for you, they begin to see you in a new light, not as someone clinging to the past, but as someone with a rich and meaningful life of their own. I remember Helen, a kind, radiant woman who had poured her whole heart into raising her children. But when they grew up and moved away, she was devastated. She waited by the phone. She called daily. She reminded them often how much she missed them. She gave love. And yet, they started pulling away. She couldn't understand. Why weren't they responding? She thought, I'm loving them. Why aren't they loving me back? Then one day, something shifted. Helen decided to stop waiting and start living. She joined a dance class. She began meeting friends for lunch. She picked up books again. She painted again. She laughed again. And do you know what happened? Her phone started ringing more. Her children began checking in, not out of guilt, but genuine interest. They wanted to hear about her life. They missed her, not just her attention. Why? Because she stopped chasing their presence and began attracting it, simply by living fully. So if you feel that ache in your heart when the phone doesn't ring, or a quiet sadness when the visits grow sparse, remind yourself of this. Your worth does not come from the attention they give you. It comes from within. And the more you nurture that inner light, the more you live for yourself, grow for yourself, and love yourself, the more others are drawn to you. Not out of obligation, but out of respectful admiration. And when you begin stepping back emotionally, not out of bitterness, but from strength, something shifts. Your children stop seeing you as someone waiting for approval and begin seeing you as someone who knows their value, someone with presence, confidence, and quiet power. That change doesn't happen overnight, but it's real, and with time, it becomes undeniable. Now, to rebuild that deeper foundation of mutual respect, there's another crucial ingredient: boundaries. Strong, clear, and loving boundaries. Let's be clear. Boundaries are not walls. They're not about shutting people out or punishing anyone. Boundaries are about teaching people how to treat you, and more importantly, how to value you. Many adult children push boundaries, not because they're trying to be hurtful, but because those boundaries were never firmly set to begin with. Think about it. If your children constantly interrupt you, make major decisions without your input, or speak in a tone that makes you feel small, it's likely not out of cruelty. But at some point, those behaviors were allowed, unchallenged, maybe because you wanted to avoid conflict or show love through patience. But here's the truth. Love without boundaries often turns into quiet resentment, and silence, it becomes permission. Let me share a story about Robert. Robert was a proud, successful man, a retired businessman who had commanded respect in every boardroom. But at home, things were different. His adult children interrupted him mid-sentence. They rolled their eyes at his advice. They spoke to him as if he were out of touch, like someone who couldn't possibly understand their world. At first, Robert let it slide. He told himself, "They're just stressed. It's not worth a fight." But each time he stayed silent, they pushed a little further. Until one night, over dinner, one of his sons snapped at him for telling a simple story. Something shifted. Robert didn't yell. He didn't scold. He waited. And then, in a calm, steady voice, he said, "You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I expect to be spoken to with respect. If that's not possible, I'll excuse myself from conversations like this." The room went silent. He hadn't made a threat. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply stated a boundary. And something powerful happened. From that moment on, the dynamic began to shift. His children started paying attention because they realized he meant it. They didn't lose access to their father, but they did have to earn his full engagement. Respect returned, not because he demanded it, but because he quietly required it. Boundaries are not about control. They're about clarity. And when your boundaries are clear, your time, energy, and presence are no longer taken for granted. They are recognized and respected. And finally, let's talk about something many parents struggle with, something that often flies under the radar: the habit of giving without appreciation. You know what I mean. You offer help. You give advice. You lend your time, your energy, sometimes even your money, not because you expect anything in return, but because that's what you've always done. That's what parents do. But it still hurts when it goes unnoticed, when the thank you never comes, when giving becomes expected, not appreciated. It's natural to want to give. That desire never fades. But here's the important truth. When you keep giving without boundaries or recognition, you don't teach them to love you more. You teach them to expect more. And slowly, your generosity becomes background noise, something invisible. Let me tell you about George. A father of 3, he was the family helper. He'd lend money without hesitation. He'd show up anytime they needed help, moving furniture, fixing a faucet, watching the grandkids. Even in his 70s, George rearranged his medical appointments just to be available at a moment's notice. But when he had a minor surgery, nothing serious, but enough to need a little help afterward, none of his children showed up. Sometimes, even our own children begin to pull away. They stop calling as often. They get busy. And if we're not careful, our happiness becomes tied to their attention. But here's a quiet truth. People respect those who are emotionally independent. When your peace, your happiness, your self-worth come from within, not from how often they call or how sweet they are, you begin to radiate something different. You stop being seen as someone clinging to the past and start being seen as someone with a rich, meaningful life of their own. The story of Helen. I remember Helen, a beautiful soul who gave everything to her children. When they moved away, she was heartbroken. She waited by the phone, called daily, reminded them how much she missed them. But the more she reached out, the more they pulled away. She was giving love, so why weren't they returning it? Then one day, something shifted. She decided to focus on herself. She joined a dance class, met friends for lunch, started reading again, painting again, laughing again. And do you know what happened? Her phone started ringing more. Her children began calling her, not just for attention, but because they missed her light. Why? Because she stopped chasing their presence and started attracting it when they don't call or visit. If you feel that quiet ache in your chest when they don't call, if you feel that loneliness when they don't visit, remind yourself of this. Your worth doesn't come from how much attention they give you. It comes from the life you choose to live. And the more you tend to your inner joy, the more others will be drawn to it, naturally, respectfully, consistently. The power of boundaries. To truly rebuild that foundation of respect, you need something else. Boundaries. Boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about teaching others how to treat you with kindness, with clarity, with dignity. Sometimes adult children push limits, not out of cruelty, but because boundaries were never clearly set. Take Robert, a retired businessman, respected by many, but dismissed by his grown children. They interrupted him, rolled their eyes, spoke over him. At first, he stayed silent, but one night at dinner, his son snapped at him over a simple story. Robert didn't yell. He waited, then calmly said, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect to be spoken to with respect. If that's not possible, I'll excuse myself." That moment changed everything. He didn't argue. He didn't demand. He simply made it clear. This is the standard. This is what I allow in my presence. And over time, they adjusted. Because boundaries create clarity, and clarity invites respect. Giving without appreciation. Now let's talk about a common and painful pattern. Giving over and over, without appreciation. You help. You advise. You give your time, energy, sometimes even your money. Not to be repaid, but because it's who you are, still. It hurts when they don't say thank you. When they expect it. When they take and take and take. George, a father of 3, was always the helper. Even in his 70s, he rearranged his doctor appointments to babysit. But when he had a minor surgery, none of his children offered to stay with him. That moment broke something inside. Instead of lashing out, George reflected. Then he made a quiet decision. No more automatic yes. He started saying things like, "I'd love to help, but I already have plans. Happy to assist if you handle X, Y, and Z." At first, his kids were annoyed, but slowly they began to say thank you. Because when generosity isn't expected, it becomes valued. You are more than just a parent. You are not just a parent. You are a full person. With your own life, your own identity, your own dreams. You've spent decades putting others first. But now that your children are grown, ask yourself, what fills your cup? Whether it's joining a class, picking up a hobby, traveling, or simply enjoying your mornings, you are allowed to prioritize your own joy. When your children see you living, not just waiting, they admire you again, not out of guilt, but out of genuine respect. Respect begins with you now, that you're speaking up, setting healthy boundaries, letting go of old expectations. You'll start to feel a change. That tightness in your chest begins to loosen. You're no longer walking on eggshells. You're no longer hoping for scraps of appreciation. You are standing tall, because you have changed. Respect isn't something we force from others. It's something we quietly inspire by the way we live. So here's the question I invite you to ask yourself. Where am I still giving my power away? Is it in the way you say yes when you mean no? Is it in the way you stay silent when your voice deserves to be heard? Is it in the way you wait for their approval to feel good about yourself? Start there. Make one small change. Say, I have other plans today. Say, please speak to me respectfully. Pick up that hobby. Book that trip. Join that class. You don't have to be perfect. What matters is that you begin. You deserve better. If you've ever felt overlooked, unappreciated, disrespected by your own children, please hear this from the heart. You deserve better. Not for what you gave in the past, but for who you are right now. And if you're still watching, I want to thank you. Your presence, your openness, your courage to look inward. It means you're already on the path, back to the respect you deserve. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced moments when your children spoke to you without the respect you hoped for? Have you tried setting boundaries or stepping back emotionally? What helped you most? Please share your story in the comments. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this video helped or touched you in any way, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find this message. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another video made just for you. You are never too old to reclaim your voice. Never too late to rebuild respect. Never too far from the peace and love you truly deserve. Thank you for spending this time with me. You are worthy, you are strong, and you are not alone. Until next time, take care. And remember, living with dignity is the most powerful message you'll ever send.